See, and you're right on top, right on point, on target. But you know, the great sadness is that up until, and I guess most of our blacks don't understand this. That's why I told you about the black communities. Do you know that in this country that there were no white historians in 400 and almost 60 years that would ever write anything tangible, specific, uplifting about black folk? Did you know that? They wouldn't even, nobody would publish it. The first time white folks started writing anything about black folk in America, it then occurred about 1948, 1940s. And only a few blacks have been able to squeeze a book out here and there, like W.B. Du Bois or G. Carter Woodson, or a couple other writers. They were able to squeeze out a few books. White folks didn't buy the books. They wouldn't publish books, wouldn't say anything positive about black folk because they control the minds by controlling the books. That's why one state legislator in South Carolina said, we're going to take all necessary means and measures to make sure that no light ever enters a Negro's mind, okay? A brain. But yet, right now, in all the textbooks in school, outside of the black community, guess who wrote all the books that they're learning out of, reading out of? And they're trying to pretend that somehow that there's no difference between the descendant of the slave master and the descendant of a slave. That is an insult to black folk. And I cannot believe that they create these schools and that people say, Dr. Ansel, why aren't your books in the school? Because for a simple reason, that whites make up the book selection committees. Even in the black universities, whites make up the selection committee. Whites own all the bookstores on black campuses. 67% of all the professors in black colleges, they're non-blacks. Somebody's BSing black people, it just blows my cotton picking mind. They say, well, Dr. Ansel, we can't find your books. No, because you ain't got enough backbone. You don't demand a damn thing. But if you're going to be a part of this Us Too movement, you got to quit compromising and going for the doctrine of unequal exchange, start demanding. No, in every school, in the elementary schools, and then we do have some schools that were doing it, like the Marcus Garvey Academies and the Malcolm X Academy. They were using the two Dirty Little Secrets book, because in those Dirty Little Secrets books, there's over 1,000 factoids, short stories about black achievement that never been known to anybody. Those two books alone, those two academies were using black books. They're using in the elementary school for history books because nobody else would teach black history. And yet, right now, I go to any black college campus and they can't get my books in there. They say, well, we don't want those kind of books that Anderson talking about in the campuses. And no blacks go say, my kids not going to your school if Dr. Anderson's books are not in the library. So you know what I said? I'll create a library pack. I'll put all 5 of those books. They can get all 99 for $99, get all 5 of those books and put them in their own house. So if you don't have the library pack in your house, in your library, in your school, then you don't have a library or a school worth a damn.
Well, I think that's so interesting because a lot of, this week we've been talking a lot about Morehouse College, and there was a billionaire that went there named Robert Smith, and he actually he gave a commencement speech. I don't know if you heard about it, Dr. Anderson, but
yeah, I heard about it.
All the student loans of all the students, and you're right. I can't imagine going through life as a black man trying to get ahead without understanding Powernomics principles. Every black man on this earth should memorize Powernomics principles more than they memorize their favorite rapper. There's no rapper on this earth, including Tupac, whose lyrics you should know better than the lyrics of Dr. Claude Anderson, because that's the type of rap you need to hear in your ear if you want to get ahead as a black man. If you ain't hearing the right kind of music, then you're gonna be tap dancing and to the wrong tune for the rest of your life. You're gonna be soft shoeing for white folks until you're old and gray.
Chapter 4: Education under outside control. In the new program of educating the Negro, what will become of the white teachers of the race? Someone recently inquired. This is a simple question requiring only a brief answer. The remaining few Christian workers who went south not so long after the Civil War and established schools and churches to lay the foundation on which we should now be building more wisely than we do, we will honor as a martyred throng. Anathema be upon them who would utter a word derogatory to the record of these heroes and heroines. We will pay high tribute also to unselfish Southerners like Haygood, Curry, Ruffner, Northern, and Vance, and to the white men of our time who believe that the only way to elevate people is to help them help themselves. The unfortunate successors of the Northern missionary teachers of Negroes, however, have thoroughly demonstrated that they have no useful function in the life of the Negro. They have not the spirit of their predecessors and do not measure up to the requirements of educators desired in accredited colleges. If Negro institutions are to be efficient as those of the whites in the South, the same high standard for the educators to direct them should be maintained. Negro schools cannot go forward with such a load of inefficiency, and especially when white presidents of these institutions are often less scholarly than Negroes who have to serve under them. By law and custom, the white presidents and teachers of Negro schools are prevented from participating freely in the life of the Negro. They occupy, therefore, a most uncomfortable dual position. When the author once taught in a school with a mixed faculty of white women connected with the institution, would bow to him in patronizing fashion when on the campus, but elsewhere they did not see him. A white president of one Negro school never entertains a Negro in his homes, preferring to shift such guests to the students' dining room. Another white president of a Negro college maintains on the campus a guest cottage, which Negroes can enter only as servants. Still another functionary does not allow students to enter his home through the front door. Negroes trained under such conditions without protest become downright cowards, and in life will continue as slaves in spite of their normal emancipation. What different method of approach or what sort of appeal would one make to the Negro child that cannot be made just as well by a white teacher? Someone asked not long ago. To be frank, we must concede that there is no particular body of facts that Negro teachers can impart to children of their own race that may not be just as easily presented by persons of another race if they do not have the same attitude as Negro teachers. But in most cases, tradition, race, hate, segregation, and terrorism make such a thing impossible. The only thing to do in this case, then, is to deal with the situation as it is. Yet, we should not take the position that a qualified white person should not teach in a Negro school. For certain work, which temporarily some whites may be able to do better than the Negro, there could be no objection to such service. But if the Negro is to be forced to live in the ghetto, he can more easily develop out of it under his own leadership than under that which is self-imposed. The Negro will never be able to show all of his originality as long as his efforts are directed from without by those who socially prescribe him. Such friends will unconsciously keep him in the ghetto. Herein, however, the emphasis is not upon the necessity for separate systems, but upon the need for common sense schools and teachers who understand and continue in sympathy with those whom they instruct. Those who take the position to the contrary have the idea that education is merely a process of imparting information. One who can give out these things or devise an easy plan for doing so then is an educator. In a sense, this is true, but it accounts for most of the troubles of the Negro. Real education means to inspire people to live more abundantly, to learn to begin with life as they find it and make it better. But the instruction so far given Negroes in colleges and universities has worked to the contrary. In most cases, such graduates have merely increased the number of malcontents who offer no program for changing undesirable conditions about which they complain. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. Happy Monday, welcome back to On the Shoulders of Giants. I am Joseph Ward. Continuing my reading of Carter G. Woodson's fantastic book, The Miseducation of the Negro. This is chapter 4, Education under Outside Control. And we're getting into the crux of, or we're getting deeper into this book, but also deeper into the mindset of the modern so-called educated Negro, and why that mindset is what it is, why the behavior patterns are what they are, and why our outcomes or lack of outcomes are what they are. Black America has an abundance of scholars, an abundance of Negroes who are educated thoroughly and widely, but Black America still has nothing for ourselves. We still control no institutions, still control no industries, no nothing we control. Even the arts and stuff that we create for ourselves, we don't control anything. Our education has merely taught us to be producers and workers for our oppressors. There are only a few of us who have the mindset and the education of liberation that can actually create something tangible and sustainable for us. There's only a few of us. Most of us are trained to be workers, worker bees, the worker ants. We just fall in line. Most of us don't think outside the box. Most of us don't even know we're in a box. Just wake up, go get it, and make sure we keep our mouth closed. All either, well, in that sense, it's unconsciously in support of the system of white supremacy, right? You don't even know you're supporting white supremacy, but you are, because your mind is so warped. Your mindset is gone. The education that you've received, it makes you feel good that you have achieved these things. But when we look around as a collective, we still don't have anything for ourselves. So that should make us feel very bad, which means we got work to do. That's why we read these books. And that's why I encourage you on a regular basis to develop your talents, develop skill sets, develop abilities. What can you do? Like, take the information that you're learning, understand it, and use that information to do something tangible, to create tangible outcomes in your community and people's lives. I'm not asking you to save the world. Just do your part. Just do your part. Just do something, right? Just do something. But that's where a proper education comes in. That's why we're reading The Miseducation of the Negro. And of course, you know, we're going to give you the chapter focus. We're going to give you our key points. We're going to give you the Dr. Wilson's main argument and my closing reflection. So yeah, that's what we're getting into today. This may not be a long video, but it's going to be an impactful video nevertheless, because these chapters are not that long, but these chapters hit hard. So we're going to make sure we get into it and not waste too much time. Make sure you hit that like button, comment, subscribe, share, busting through the shadow banning, busting through the hate. You know, when we're inspiring people to do something tangible, they don't want your information to get out, but we're going to keep doing what we got to do to get this information out. And we ain't going to stop dropping it. So y'all make sure y'all continue to hit that like button, continue to share, continue to subscribe, hit that hype button, join the channel as a member, join the Patreon as a member, all of that. Continue to support us as we do what we do. So let's go ahead and get into this chapter focus. All right. In this chapter, Dr. Carter G. Woodson exposes how the entire structure of Black education in America is under the control and influence of outsiders, mainly white institutions, philanthropists, and policymakers. I'm glad he threw the philanthropist in there. He argues that as long as the Negro's education is directed and financed by those who benefit from his subordination, it will never serve the liberation of the Black race. I'm going to read that again. He argues that as long as the Negro's education is directed and financed by those who benefit from his subordination, it will never serve the liberation of the Black race. Instead, this education under outside control keeps Black people dependent, submissive, and misled, turning their schools into instruments of control rather than tools of empowerment. I'm going to just let that marinate for a minute, right? Because, you know, especially in the HBCU realm, we argue, complain, fuss, and fight about either being underfunded or not being funded by white people. We beg white people to fund our HBCUs because we don't want to do it ourselves. White people have either founded HBCUs, funded HBCUs, or they're over the control of HBCUs, especially if they state ran like FAMU. That's why I call them WHBCUs. And that's why we get the overall communal results that we get when it comes to the products of HBCUs. And I'm saying that as a product of an HBCU. So our key points for this video today is control over Negro education lies in the hands of outsiders. philanthropy as a tool of domination, Negro colleges as instruments of limitation, the destruction of independent Black thought. Dependence prevents progress. The need for self-determination in education, education as a weapon for liberation or control. So those are our key points. So our first key point, let's go ahead and get into it now. Control over Negro education lies in the hands of outsiders. Wilson emphasizes that Black education is not self-directed. It is controlled by outsiders who decide what, how, and why Black students learn. And if you've ever been to an HBCU, especially a public ran HBCU, they control all of that. They control, especially nowadays in 2025. The states and the federal government told everybody what they can and can't say, what they can and can't do, and you have to adhere if you want to continue to get funding. You want to continue to moving forward. You got to fall in line. How do I know? Because I be on HBCU campuses and I work with HBCUs. I do events, programs, and initiatives with HBCUs. Trust me. I talk with the professors. I see how the language has changed from 2 years ago to a year ago to now. When Trump came in office, everything changed. When Kamala and them came in office, things was changing. That's how I go. White-controlled boards, philanthropic organizations, and religious missions dictate the curriculum and training methods in Black schools and colleges. The results is that Black education serves the need and comfort of white society, not the advancement of Black people. Negro schools are structured to produce compliant workers, loyal servants, and imitation Europeans, not independent thinkers or leaders. So remember the quote that came from Carter G. Woodson out of the book. When you control a man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his actions because I already programmed you to think, walk, talk, eat, sleep, live, behave, work, everything white. Everything for you is for white interest and white interest and white acceptance. So once again, we got work to do. So let's go ahead and get back into this. Remember, this is chapter 4. Hello, my bad. This is chapter 4, education under outside control. So once again, please hit that like button, comment, subscribe, share. Let's get this information out. And I appreciate all the love, likes, and views on the last week's video. So let's make sure we get this one popping too. Unfortunately, Negroes who think as the author does and dare express themselves as branded are opponents of interracial cooperation. As a matter of fact, however, such Negroes are the real workers in carrying out a program of interracial effort. Cooperation implies equality of the participants in the particular task at hand. On the contrary, however, the usual way now is for the whites to work out their plans behind closed doors, have them approved by a few Negroes serving nominally on the board, and then employ a white or mixed staff to carry out their program. That is not interracial cooperation. It is merely the ancient idea of calling upon the inferior to carry out the orders of the superior, to express it in post-classic language, as did Jesse O. Thomas. The Negroes do the cooing while the whites do the operating. The Negroes do the cooing while the whites do the operating. Why? Because they trained the Negroes to coo. This unsound attitude of the friends of the Negro is due to the persistence of the medieval idea of controlling unprivileged classes. Behind closed doors, these friends say you need to be careful in advancing Negroes to commanding positions unless it can be determined beforehand that they will do what they are told to do. You can never tell when some Negroes will break out and embarrass their friends. After being advanced to positions of influence, some of them have been known to run amok and advocate social equality or demand for their race the privileges of democracy when they should restrict themselves to the education and religious development. It is often said, too, that the time is not ripe for Negroes to take over the administration of their institutions, for they do not have the contacts for raising money. But what becomes of this argument, when we remember what Booker T. Washington did for Tuskegee, and observe what R. Moulton and John Hope are doing today. As the first Negro president of Howard University, Mordecai W. Johnson has raised more money for that institution among philanthropists than all of its former presidents combined. Furthermore, if after 3 generations of Negro colleges have not produced men qualified to administer these affairs, such an admission is an eloquent argument that they have failed ingloriously and should be immediately closed. Recently, someone asked me how I connect my criticism of the higher education of the Negroes with new developments in this sphere, and especially with the 4 universities in the South, which are to be made possible by millions obtained from governments, boards, and philanthropists. I believe that the establishment of these 4 centers of learning at Washington, Atlanta, Nashville, and New Orleans can be so carried out as to mark an epoch in which the development of the Negro race. On the other hand, there is just as much possibility for a colossal failure of the whole scheme. If these instruments are to be the replica of universities like Harvard, Yale, Columbia, and Chicago, if the men who are to administer them and teach in them are to be the products of roll-top desk theorists who have never touched the life of the Negro, the money thus invested will be just as profitably spent of it is used to buy peanuts to throw at animals in the circus. I'm just saying, if you're not really developing the brains of the black folk, what we talking about? But that's by design. That is by design, and we have to understand what has happened, and what is continuing to happen, and take our education into our own hands, right? So the second key point is philanthropy as a tool of domination, right? Woodson warns that white philanthropy, while appearing benevolent, often has hidden motives, right? Wealthy donors and foundations use their money to shape the direction and limits of Negro education. We're going to give y'all this money, but we want y'all to talk about this, but y'all can't talk about this. And any Negro that talk about this, you got to either get them in line or get rid of them. Because we got to shape more black minds. Black skin, white mask. We need more black minds turned into white minds. We need the black people to not be a threat to white supremacy. We need to make sure we keep producing the right type of Negroes. If they're going to come out these universities, have to be the right type of Negroes who can continue to not be a threat to the system of white supremacy. They fund schools that emphasize manual labor, religion, and moral obedience instead of business, politics, or science. Why go shake up the world? Because if you shake up the world, you're going to shake up the system of white supremacy. These donors are not investing in black liberation. They are preserving the racial hierarchy by producing docile, religious, and obedient workers who accept second-class status, right? Another note by Carter G. Woodson is that philanthropy is often a subtle form of control disguised as kindness. Oh, man, we read that. We read that. Think about it. Think about it. Think about it. Think about it. I'm just saying. So back to the reading. Some of the thought behind the new educational movement is to provide in the South for educating the Negroes who are now crowding northern universities, especially the medical schools, many of which will not admit Negroes because of the racial friction in hospital practice, in the rush merely to make special provisions for these undesirable students. However, the institutions which are to train them may be established on false ideas and make the same blunders of the smaller institutions which have preceded them. It will hardly help a poisoned patient to give him a large dose of poison. In higher institutions for Negroes organized along lines required for people differently circumstanced, some few may profit by being further grounded in the fundamentals. Others may become more adept in the exploitation of their people. and the smaller number may cross the divide and join whites in useful service. But the large majority of the products of such institutions will increase rather than diminish the load which the masses have had to carry ever since their emancipation. Such ill-prepared workers will have no function, no foundation which upon to build. The education of any people should begin with the people themselves. But Negroes thus trained have been dreaming about the ancients of Europe and about those who have tried to imitate them. In a course at Harvard, for example, students are required to find out whether Pericles was justly charged with trying to supplant the worship of Jupiter and that of Juno. Since that time, Negroes thus engaged have learned that they would have been much better prepared for work among the Negroes in the Black Belt if they had spent that time learning why John Jasper of Sun Don't Move fame joined with Joshua in contending with the planet stood still in the middle of the line while he fought the battle the second time. Talking the other day with one of the men now giving the millions to build the 4 Negro universities in the South, however, I find that he is of the opinion that accredited institutions can be established in mushroom fashion with theorists out of touch with the people. In other words, you can go almost anywhere and build a $3 million plant, place in charge a white man to do what you want accomplished, and in a short while he can secure or have trained to order the men necessary to make the university. We want here, he will say, a man who has his master's degree in English. Send me another who has his doctor's degree in sociology, and I can use one more in physics. All right, so key point number 3. Negro colleges as instruments of imitation. Black colleges founded and operated under white supervision teach students to imitate white culture rather than develop their own. You just putting a black face on white culture. That's why everybody want to be the first black of this or the black version of this that is white. Stop trying to be the black version of what is white. Their presidents, boards, and teachers are often trained to please white benefactors and uphold European ideas. If you want to keep getting this white money, you got to keep tap dancing, monkey. Dance, monkey. Dance, monkey. Get these peanuts. The curriculum excludes African history, black achievement, and any content that builds racial pride or critical thought. Once I graduated from FAMU, I would tell people, and I still tell people today, I argue people down because they say, you need to go to an HBCU so you can learn your culture, learn your people. No, I would say 95% of people who graduate from HBCUs, and I can increase that, but I'll be generous. 95% of people who graduate from HBCUs know nothing about African history, culture, or anything. It's not taught at HBCUs. It's not taught at all. Well, I'm not going to say it's not taught at all, but it's not taught in abundance. You have to be in the right place at the right time, taking the right classes in the right majors to actually learn some black history, or you just have to give a damn and just go start looking for it and learning. But other than that, 95% of HBCU graduates, I would say, leave out there with no knowledge of African history or culture. FAMU has a black archives right on the campus, and most students have no idea that it's a black archive and have never been inside of it, and there's so much history in it. Consequently, graduates emerge disconnected from their people, ashamed of their heritage and eager to serve white approval. Wilson argues this creates a class of educated Negroes, the bourgeois, who function as buffers between white rulers and black masses, reinforcing, not challenging, oppression. The bougie boule. Now experience has, experience has shown that men of this type may fill in, but a universally cannot be established with such raw recruits. The author once had some experience in trying to man a college in this fashion, and the result was a story that would make an interesting headline for the newspapers. When Dr. William Barnett Harper was establishing the University of Chicago, he called on the headship of the various departments, only men who had distinguished themselves in the creative world. Some had advanced degrees, some had not. Several of them had never done any form of graduate work at all. All of them, however, were men whose thought was moving the world. It may be argued that Negroes have no such men and must have them trained, but such a thing cannot be forced, as we're now doing it. It would be much better to stimulate the development of the more progressive teachers of old than experiment with novices produced by the degradation of higher education. The degradation of the doctrine especially dawned upon the author the other day more clearly than ever when a friend of his rushed into his office saying, "I have been trying to see you for several days. I have just failed to get a job for which I have been working, and I am told that I cannot expect a promotion until I get my doctor's degree." That is what actually he said, dark doctor's degree. Doctor's degree. That is what he called it. He could not even pronounce the word. So instead of saying doctor's degree, he said doctor's degree. That is what he said. He could not even pronounce the words, but he's determined to have his doctor's degree to get the job in sight. This shameful status of this shameful status of higher education is due to a large measure of low standards of institutions with a tendency toward the diploma mill producer. The diploma mill procedure. Let me read that sentence over. This shameful status of higher education is due in a large measure to low standards of institutions with a tendency toward the diploma mill procedure. To get a job or to hold one, you go in and stay until they grind you out a doctor's degree, and you do not have to worry any further. The assumption is that almost any school would be glad to have you there for, and you will receive a large salary. Investigation has shown, however, that men who have the doctorate not only lose touch with the common people, but they do not have as much creative work as those of less formal education. After having his honor conferred upon them, these so-called scholars often rest on their oars. Few persons have thought of the seriousness of such inertia among men who are put in the lead of things because of meeting statutory requirements of frontier universities, which are not on the frontier. The General Education Board and the Julius Rosenwald Fund have a policy which may be a partial solution to the undeveloped Negro college instructors problem. These foundations are giving Negro teachers scholarships to improve themselves for work in the sphere in which they are now laboring in the South. These boards as a rule do not send one to school to work for the doctor's degree. If they find a man of experience, a good judgment, showing possibilities for growth, they will provide for him and study a year more to refresh his mind with whatever there is new in this field. Experience has shown that teachers thus helped have later done much better work than doctors of philosophy made to order. So he's hammering, he's steadfast in hammering in that the higher the education you get, basically, the more useless you are to your people. The dumber you get. The more you go up the educational ladder, the dumber you get. Here's the next one. The next key point is the destruction of independent Black thought. When Black educators try to teach truth, they are silenced or punished. Teachers and administrators who question the system risk losing their jobs or funding because they are labeled as radical or ungrateful. This censorship prevents honest dialogue about race, power, and liberation in Negro schools. Over time, this procedure, a culture of fear and conformity, educators teach what they are told, not what the people need. True education, Woodson says, must be under the control of the people it is meant to serve. Let me get to the next key point. Dependence prevents progress. Woodson argues that as long as Black education is financed and controlled by others, true progress will remain impossible. We ain't going nowhere. We ain't going nowhere. We ain't going nowhere. We ain't going, right? He compares this dependence to economic and political servitude. If someone else pays for your school, they will also determine what type of education you receive. Only makes sense. The Negro must develop his own institutions, curricula, and leadership independent of outside influence. Otherwise, Black education will continue to produce servants to other men's systems, not builders of their own. Marinate. Let it marinate. Just let it marinate. Just let it marinate in your brain real quick. Just let it marinate. All right. The Northern universities, moreover, cannot do graduate work for Negroes along certain lines when they are concentrating on the educational needs of people otherwise circumstanced. The graduate school for Negroes studying chemistry is with George W. Carver at Tuskegee. At least 100 youths should wait daily upon the words of this scientist to be able to pass on to the generations unborn his great knowledge of agricultural chemistry. Negroes desiring to specialize in agriculture should do it with workers like T.M. Campbell and B.F. Hubert among the Negro farmers in the South. In education itself, situation is the same. Neither Columbia nor Chicago can give an advanced course in Negro rural education, for their working education is based primarily upon what they know of the educational needs of the whites. Such work for Negroes must be done under the direction of the trailblazers who are building schoolhouses and reconstructing the educational program of those in the backwoods. Leaders of this type can supply the foundation upon which a university of realistic education may be established. We offer no argument here amongst earning and advanced degrees, but these should come as honors conferred for training crowned with scholastic distinction, not to enable a man to increase his salary or to find a better paying position. The schools which are now directing attention exclusively to these external marks of learning will not contribute much to the uplift of the Negro. In Cleveland, not long ago, the author found at the Western Reserve University something unusually encouraging. A native of Mississippi, a white man trained in a Northern university and now serving as a professor in one, has under him in sociology, a Negro student from Georgia. For his dissertation, this Negro is collecting the sayings of his people in everyday life, their morning greetings, their remarks about the weather, the comments on things which happen around them, their reaction to things which strike them as unusual, and their efforts to interpret life as the paranormal passes before them. This white Mississippian and Black Georgian are on the right way to understand the Negro, and if they do not fall out about social equality, they will serve the Negro much better than those who are trying to find out whether Henry VIII lusted more after Anne Boleyn than after Catherine of Aragon, or whether Elizabeth was justly styled as more untruthful than Philip II of Spain, because that ain't helping us. Who cares about Philip? Nobody care about no Henry. We don't care about Anne. We don't care about Catherine. We don't care about Aragon. We don't care about Elizabeth. We don't care about Philip. We don't care about Spain. None of that stuff, because it ain't helping us win. We only care about things that can help us win. All right, so that's the end of the chapter. As I told you, it was a short chapter. It was a short chapter. So that's the end of the reading of the chapter. But let me get to the end of my key points and, go ahead and summarize this. Right? So the sixth key point is the need for self-determination in education. Woodson's solution is educational self-determination. The idea that Black people must design, finance, and control their own schools. This means teaching African and African American history, business ownership, practical skills, and critical thinking rooted in the Black experience. Education should prepare the Negro to uplift his community, not to escape it. He warns that imitation is death. That is, the salvation of the race lies in creating an education based on the needs, realities, and geniuses of the Negro. The last key point is education as a weapon for liberation or control. The central argument of chapter 4 is that education is never neutral. It either liberates or enslaves. 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 When the oppressor controls education, it becomes a weapon to keep the oppressed ignorant and compliant. When the oppressed control their own education, it becomes a weapon of freedom and transformation. Woodson reminds us that until the Negro controls the mind of his children through self-directed education, he will always, and I mean always, be ruled by others. Always be ruled by others. If you don't control your mind, somebody else will. So Dr. Carter G. Woodson's main argument of this chapter, and we've said it before, we're going to say it again, hammer it home. The education of the Negro has been under the control of those who have enslaved his mind. To free himself, he must take control of his own learning, his own schools, and his own vision of progress. In education under outside control, and this is my summary, Dr. Woodson exposes one of the deepest truths of our struggle, that the oppressor doesn't have to change your body if he can control your mind through education. This chapter challenges us to ask, who shapes our schools today? Who decides what our children learn today? Dr. Woodson's message is still relevant today as it was when he wrote the book. Until the Black community controls its education, it will never control its destiny. Until we control our education, until we control how we shape our minds, we will never control our destiny. How do you feel about that? If you made it this far in the video, please hit that like button and drop in the comments, how do you feel about us never being able to control our destiny if we never control our minds? And how do we regain control over our minds? Please answer that question in the comments. How do you feel about us not being able to control our destiny if we can't control our education and if we can't control our minds? How do you feel about that? So that's chapter 4, Miseducation of the Negro, Carter G. Woodson. So next week, we'll be reading chapter 5, to the failure to learn to make a living, right? So to me, once again, you implement this information by teaching people things that's practical and useful to the Black experience, that's constructive. Teaching people things that are constructive learning, constructive behaviors. And if you want to know what constructive means, that is what you teaching going to help Black people be able to liberate ourselves. And if it's not, then it ain't constructive. So let's think about that. I am Joseph Ward. This is On the Shoulders of Giants. This is our Monday book review, our Black author book review. Once again, this is The Miseducation of the Negro by Carter G. Woodson, chapter 4. I keep forgetting the title of the chapter, but chapter 4. Hold on. Education under outside control. Chapter 4, Education under outside control. Check me out. Hit that like button, comment, subscribe, share. Please join the channel as a member. You can join the Patreon as a member. All of that, man. You know, continue to support what we got going on. I love you all, and make sure you catch the next video coming up. Peace, peace, peace.